start going. I'd like to do things a little bit different than we did last time. First off, I'm going to moderate a little bit. We're going to start with a presentation, I suspect, from the engineering team. We're going to let you guys know what their plan is, at least, as it stands now anyway. And then we're going to open up the floor to ask questions and get feedback. This room, unlike the room downstairs, has microphones everywhere, which means, number one, that you will be audible on YouTube when you ask this question, so we're not going to have to pass around a microphone. It also means that basically wherever you are in this room and whoever you're talking to at basically any volume, it will also be audible on YouTube. So if you want to make fun of my solid pink tie, then I will hear that when I go back and listen to this, and I'll make secretarial choices accordingly in the future. With that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to these guys. Same thing that I said last time applies. Last time I really didn't want to moderate at all because ultimately I and the Board of Commissioners will sit as judge and jury on what I suspect will be a conditional use application. I think that there were some defects in not really having a moderator last time, so I'm going to stand up and moderate this time, but I'm trusting everybody to recognize if I repeat your question or rephrase your question, it's not because I'm endorsing it, and if I try and clarify their answer or press them on their answer, it's not because I'm endorsing that. I still very much have an open mind either way. So guys, take it away.
Hello, my name is Rob Lambert. I'm with Site Engineering Concepts. I'm the civil engineer on the project, and Dave Sanders here to my right is with our firm and worked on also the stormwater. So after our first meeting, we heard a lot of questions about stormwater. And after the meeting, we followed up with Steve Orsini, the township engineer in Radnor, and we followed up with Steve Burgo, the township engineer in Tredyffrin, to really start talking about the broader area of stormwater in proximity to this property, and then also look at our property and how that impacts the area. So just a quick show of hands, just so I get an idea of where everybody is, whether it's the kind of the Forest, Fairfield, Grant area. Who's all from that? Okay. And then how about the Hedgerow and West Ave? Okay, so a couple there. So I'm going to start with Area A. So that was the area that's down below. I wanted to talk just briefly, as we're looking at this, about stormwater in general. Stormwater is a little bit of an inexact science. Right? We have different rainfall events with different cover characteristics, so that the earth's covered with different things, right? You might have trees, you might have lawn, you might have your house, driveway, all these different components. But there are models, engineering models, to model what is predicted runoff from various levels of storms. And you've heard 2-year storm, you've heard 100-year storm. Those are a little bit of unfortunate terms for what the storms are. A 100-year storm is actually, it has a 1% probability of happening in any 1 year. And so you can have those in multiple years, you just have a 1% probability of that happening in any 1 year. So it's not that it's going to happen once every 100 years, is the storm, right? So that's a misconception about what it is, and I think an unfortunate name for it. And then when you have all the models, you take a look at what are the cover characteristics. So I'm going to focus first off on this Area A, and what I'd like to do is go over what currently exists and how the water runs off, and then focus a little bit more on the site-specific comments, and what happens to the site, what water runs off, how we control that water. So I'm going to enlarge the Area A. So starting with Area 1, here's the churches right here, Old Eagle School Road, Fairfield, Forest, Grant, Stratford, Eagle. This is the subject property. And what we've broken it up is using available information. So we have an actual survey of the property that we're working on. Then we used publicly available contour information. So it shows us where all the grades are. We've overlaid that on the aerial for ease of use. Then we went out and physically walked the properties, the area, the streets, to take a look at both infrastructure as far as inlets, where the inlets are, and also just small nuances of where the high point is. So we know that looking at the road, right here, the water runs this way, and from this point, it appears to run this way. And as many of you know, living in the neighborhood, some of the roads are very flat. And so there might be some variation to it, but in general, so looking at this A1 area, in general, all this area winds up down in this location. Area A2 is it's really coming out to Old Eagle School Road. So then I think from what I've gathered, an area of concern, a lot of concern is right in this vicinity of forest. And then there's been some concern up in this area where all the water runs off, I think, through a backyard. And so, again, we've been trying to gather information. We might not be perfect, but we're gathering as much information as we can. And so then you have area A3, which is a lot of forest, a little bit of Grant. A6, so a lot of Stratford, looks like it does not actually come down Grant. When we actually walked it, took a look at it, it looks like it comes down Stratford. There's a little bit of a low spot right at Stratford and Grant, right about this location. But a lot of it looks like it continues down Stratford, both rainfall events and just walking it, taking a look at it. Obviously, we have the Grant section. There's an inlet right at the end of Grant. There's another one in the yard right here. They come down through forest. They tie into a collection system in forest that actually runs all the way up to here. So it runs down through forest, out forest, and out to a collection system in Old Eagle School Road. Ultimately winds up down by Calico Corners into the stream that's right there. And so really just trying to figure out where the base is. In this lower right-hand corner, I won't go through all of the numbers, but there are we broke up both area and then impervious areas. And so areas of impervious will generate more runoff, right? If you pave areas and have no stormwater controls, which from my observation, I did not see any stormwater controls in this area. Some people might have one in the backyard if they had an addition, but all these houses and developments were built at a time where they didn't really have stormwater. The different file actually had information in it from when Grant was developed, talking about the stormwater and that they were going to basically grade it away from the houses so everything would be okay when I went through some of the old letters in there. So the area, I think that's really the most problematic areas are going to be, so this is just an enlargement of the previous slide, is area A3, A5, and A4 are really the areas that are contributing to the issue that you're seeing down in Forest. Out of those areas, and I have some cheat sheets here, so please forgive me because there are lots of different numbers and I won't get them all right. So on area A3, it's about 292,000 feet. So that's this green area. Out of that area, there's about 100,000 square feet of impervious coverage. So that's the driveway, walkways, pavement, houses. The area A4, which is the portion of the Hamilton property that drains toward Forest, is about 217,000 feet with 50,000 square feet of impervious. So about 2/3, and I'm going to use round numbers, so if it makes it easier for me. 2/3 of the area and about half the impervious. And then you have the area of A5, which was Grant, which is about an acre, and it's nearly 50% impervious in that area. And so we took a look at that, and we run it through a hydrologic model to figure out how much runoff is coming off of these areas when it rains. And I used the 2-year storm and a 100-year storm, right? Again, round numbers, 2-year storm is about 3 inches of rain, 100-year storm is a little over 7 inches of rain. So again, both of those models. The model, which is an accepted model, uses a 24-hour duration. And so it looks at a storm over 24 hours. It's basically a bell curve saying that you get the highest amount of rainfall in the middle and tailing on both sides. So when we looked at that, the area of Grant, which is A5, has 2 cubic feet per second. It's again, that's how usually stormwater is looked at, is in cubic feet per second. So that has 2 cubic feet per second during a 2-year storm runoff. The Hamilton area, although it's a much larger area, it had, only 50,000 square feet of impervious. And so when the water runs off of those impervious surfaces, all of the models take into account what that surface is. So if it's grass, it has what's something called initial abstractions. And so if you're grass or landscaping, and so there's a certain amount of water when it starts to rain that's going to saturate the soil, right? And so that's going to reduce the amount of runoff that happens just without any stormwater controls is what we're talking about now. So when it starts to rain, the soil absorbs a certain amount of water before you really start getting runoff, right? So once those initial abstractions are full, the water, the water is going to run off. And so when we get to the 100-year storm and talk about that, is really all those initial abstractions are full, and it's all running off at that point when it rains. Is to oversimplify what happens. So we had 2 cubic feet per second, 5 cubic feet per second, and the green area was 12. And that modeled, the green area, I should say actually, the 12 included all the areas modeled together. And so getting to this point was 12. And so taking a look at that, this site was only contributing, again, about 25% of the runoff during that 2-year storm. So 75% of the runoff comes from the A3 and the A5 areas. Looking at a 100-year storm, the numbers go to 8 cubic feet per second for this area, 22 cubic feet per second for this area. And so while the numbers were much closer for a 2-year storm, when you got to the 100-year storm, you had more runoff coming off of this because all those initial abstractions are full and you're getting more runoff, right? And so that's why the numbers aren't necessarily just following a certain pattern. And then when we model it all together and say how much water gets to here, it's about 55 cubic feet per second. So it's a lot of water getting down to the bottom. And that is what exists today. The area we talked about, area A6, but again, that seemed to bypass. It wasn't coming down to this area. There's some rutting and things along the side of Stratford Avenue and some things that are happening up here that I think we can address, and the next slide will start showing how we start to address those pieces. So this is a little bit of a nuance between the two, right? So if you look at, this was the pre-development, you can see the area A6 runs all the way across the top of the site. The site actually drains out to Stratford for a portion of this area. When we go to this is the contemplation of when we do our development, how is the water going to change? We're actually collecting a little bit more water off of Stratford to help improve the conditions, the low spot here. We're trying to reduce the amount of water getting there, and we can control the water once we put in our stormwater facilities on this site. And so those are really the only changes. You can see A5 and A3, there are no changes to those because obviously that's out of our area. So going to...
Can you go back a slide, please?
Yep.
And then go over again. So the question I have, I'm on Forest, right, where there's issues, obviously. If I were, not trying to poke words in your mouth, but in the proposed plan, this one, would that theoretically, since most of it's coming towards Forest,
I'm getting to the answer to your question. If you bear with me, I think I'm going to answer
would
it.
that make it worse?
I'm going to answer your question, right? So we're putting in stormwater control. So we talked about all these areas, all the houses on Forest, Grant, Stratford, Hedgerow, were really built without any stormwater control. So all of that water that's falling is running off. Current regulation requires us to, if you hold your question 1 minute, current regulation requires us to control stormwater from our site. It actually goes above, and it originally started when they said, okay, don't discharge any more water than you currently discharge. It was kind of the original thinking in stormwater. Over the years, those regulations have gotten much more stringent. They become, not only are you just controlling the rate of runoff, you're controlling some volume of runoff, and you're over controlling the rates. So they're saying, the regulation says, we actually have to, although we have, what's the number, it was 3 and 22 coming off of here, we actually have to over control that. And not only do we have to over control it, but in our model, we have to model 20% of our impervious as a meadow. And so we have to take and say, area that we have as impervious doesn't count, and it has to be a meadow, and that's what we're now modeling. So our regulation says we actually have to reduce the amount of runoff coming off of our property in addition to the other controls. And so what we're proposing, I'm going to go forward here. So this was just, again, site-specific. This was pre-development, and this was what we're proposing post-development. Now, post-development, again, forest is down in this bottom left-hand corner, and so the area in yellow I haven't focused on because this drains out to Eagle Road, out the other direction, out toward Lancaster. There's an existing collection system there that we'll be connecting to. Again, we'll be reducing all the rates in a similar fashion in that direction as we are the others, but I'm not focusing on that tonight unless somebody had a specific question of that area. So all the other colors here are draining down to a forest with the exception of the pink. So the pink was that A6 area that continues down toward the intersection of Stratford and Gray. All the other colors are now controlled in stormwater facilities. And so we're proposing 5 stormwater facilities on this site. So we have a stormwater facility here, a stormwater facility here, one here, and one here in this watershed. And we have one over here for the Eagle Road watershed. So we have 4 stormwater facilities that are proposed for development that is draining toward forest. When we model that, again, talking about our models, the model also takes into account the volume in the basin and how we can meter the volume, the water leaving that. And so we can control the rates and we can control the volume. We've done infiltration testing, the soils accept water, so we can meet any infiltration requirements. Again, we're spreading that infiltration out throughout the site. It's going to be able to seep back into the ground, which reduces the volume of runoff leaving the site. And so, again, the grade area would remain the same, but our area went from 3 CFS discharging to a 2-year storm to about 0.2, right? So we're more or less bringing it down to a very, very low flow. And I'll talk about storm, I'll confuse everyone a little bit more when I talk about the storm basins in 1 minute. But the other, for the 100-year storm, we're reducing it from 22 to 12. So we're almost cutting that in half. So we're cutting the 100-year storm, the rate of runoff almost in half. When we look at the area, I think I ran out of slides yet. When I look at the area down on Forest, the pre-development was 12. The post-development goes to 10. Again, we only had 3 coming off of the Hamilton property, so even when we bring that down to 0.2, right, it drops it to 10 cubic feet per second for a 2-year storm. The 100-year storm went from 55 to 46, so we're reducing it by almost 20%, coming down to this area during that 100-year storm. So another conservative piece that the regulation requires is Radnor doesn't allow us to count the volume of stone in a storm basin. So this is what a typical storm basin looks like. So you have large diameter pipes that are all in a bed of stone. There's stone in between these, there's stone on top, and it gets all wrapped in a geotextile like a big present. And then you have obviously the void space. What Radnor's code says is we can only count the area within the pipe. We actually can't count the area within the stone. Stone has about a 40% void space. And so inherent the way Radnor requires us to do the calculations, there's actually a lot more volume in these basins that we can't even count in our calculations. If we do count the calculations, and so looking at the infiltration volume, we were infiltrating 23,000 cubic feet of water back into the ground. If we count the stone, that number almost doubles. It goes to 41,000 cubic feet that we'd be able to infiltrate. And our runoff, again, remember the post-development was 0.2 and 12. If we count the stone, the 2-year storm basically stays the same just because there's some uncontrolled areas that stays at the 0.2, but the 100-year drops in half. And so practically, we're actually only going to have 6.3 coming out of this basin versus the 22 that was pre-development. And so from a practical perspective, we're actually, cutting down the amount of runoff coming off of this property by doing the development. We have 25% of the runoff, more or less, coming off after the development than before the development in this area. So those were the areas of Forest and Grant. Before I go to the other side, I want to answer a couple of questions when people have. Gentlemen.
If you could go back to your picture of the pipe. So just so mechanically I understand how this works. The water that goes into the pipe gets directed, that flows out in a specified path to wherever, to some.
So the water, I'll use this. So the water to each of these systems, so like this, I'll use this red area,
Yep.
right? And so we have a basin in this location. So we'll have inlets and we'll have pipes that lead into this basin, right? And so the water's directed into the basin so we can get it there, it gets controlled. There will be an outlet structure.
But the basin contains the pipes themselves.
Correct.
That field of pipe.
Correct. So when I'm talking about the basin,
that's what we're talking
this
about.
is what's in each one of those
Yep.
areas.
Okay.
And so in those, 3 areas, we have, those big areas. There's a fourth one down here, but the areas up in here, those are, just piped structures.
Yep.
And so water gets piped from inlets, along the driveway. We're actually going to add an inlet out on Stratford Road to be able to collect the runoff that's running along Stratford, to be able to control that water. We have no obligation to do that, but hearing people's concerns and talking to the applicant, they were willing to be able to capture that off-site runoff, bring it into the site to be able to control it, because we have a means of controlling it with the stormwater basins. Once all these get piped, they flow together. It gets a little bit complicated, but there's the existing pipe going down Forest that we would directly connect to have those discharge. And that system currently gets a lot more water in it than what we would be providing once we're all done. Just wait 1 minute. He was next.
So, quick question. I don't know if you can answer this, or Jack, you might be able to answer it, but if we look at the existing mapping, which watersheds are impacted today by rainfall in that area?
We would refer to it as the West Wayne watershed.
Okay.
You've divided this up into a much more finely gradiated area.
Yeah, so this property is in the Darby Creek, is it A? I have a note here. I believe it was the Darby Creek A watershed. The single-family section is in the other category of Radnor's. Radnor has different districts. It's in the other district.
And which other district is that?
I think I don't know if there's a different term for that, Steve, would be the...
I'm sorry I don't have my manual with me, but Rob's correct. There's some difference in the requirements for each district. I could go grab that and show you if we get to the Eagle Road development.
But as it relates to watersheds,
It drains to Gulf Creek, so the other one drains to Gulf Creek. So when we get to the other one, I can show you where it goes. But
That's in the break on Eagle Road that goes down the hill.
so what area of this mapping is going to Gulf?
the next section of the discussion will go out to
Okay.
Gulf Creek.
All right.
Yeah, the other property.
Just for clarification, and then my question, the pipes that are part of that basin area, are those perforated pipe?
Yes.
Okay, so they're discharging water into the stone,
Correct.
which is part of the infiltration system that you're talking about.
Correct.
All right, we had some information from the National Resource Conservation Service that shows us that the Hamilton property is classified as having disturbed soil over schist and igneous rock formations. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Subsequently, they rate the value of deep infiltration as severely limited. And we've got an excerpt from their website on that. So if you're relying on...
So we do site-specific testing.
Okay.
So that's generalized testing of kind of the think it's actually the whole country, where they go through and look at the underlying geology. We're required to do actually site testing. So we've gone out and excavated. We had a geologist go out, excavate, look at the soils, run a permeability test, and the permeability tests, I don't have the rates with me, but they passed, that we were able to use those rates. Furthermore, the calculations, the way we run them, we exclude, so when we look at the outlets from a stormwater basin, we exclude any exfiltration, so any air infiltration, right? And the water running into the soil, we don't count that at all in our calculation. So all those numbers may actually come down a little bit more. So you can kind of start seeing that there's, conservative calculations on top of conservative calculations. Like the regulation has made it very conservative in the model and trying to improve the amount of stormwater that we're doing.
So the water that gets infiltrated into the soil, if you're saying that it is suitable for infiltration, then, and if you don't mind, if we can have when you're running your reports, we can have the data, that'd be helpful.
So sir, I can just tell you, and I don't mean to interrupt, so from Radnor Township standpoint, when we review, that's all required to be submitted to us.
Okay.
The infiltration testing, all the rates, all their calculations. So,
When we get it, it'll go on the website.
correct.
So it would be public knowledge.
Yes.
And when will that be?
We haven't
Be as
determined
soon as
that.
tomorrow.
Oh, okay, good.
They're
good.
free to submit whenever they choose to, but understand that if it is tomorrow, it would mean that they've submitted their land development plan.
I'm sorry, say that again? It'll be.
It will be whenever they submit their land development plan. They are free to do so at any point. They're holding off in part to have these kinds of conversations with us. But there is neither an end date where it must be within the next 6 months or something, nor is there a early date, meaning they cannot be for the next 3 months. It's whenever they choose to file.
So
Let me just say, we've got a whole bunch of other hands, and I know you've asked a couple of questions. We're going to come back around the room, so let me kick you over to Brian for a minute.
I was just going to ask if these underground detention systems are going to be built to be easily maintained, because they do fill up pretty quickly with silt and.
So we will have obligations. So one of the township has operation and maintenance that we have to do on them, or the final owners will have to do on them. And then also we will have to get what's called an Mpds permit. So it's a permit that's it's a state permit that's issued through the conservation district, and they also have operation and maintenance requirements from the state. And behind, yes, behind him, I can hardly see it back there.
Do you have a question? I do. So when you did the storm, first of all, what's the depth? What's the bottom depth of the stormwater management systems?
They vary. I think that they were 6.
48 pipes, about 6 feet.
Yeah,
7 feet.
yeah, 6 to 8 feet, depending on where we are and the final grades and lots of
At
different
that
things.
level, when you excavated the test pit and you evaluated, did you run into seeps or a perched water table, or was it?
They did not, and they have to excavate 2 feet beyond where we go just to show that there's any separation to any of those limiting features. And so in the test pits we did not encounter any of those features.
So you didn't hit any groundwater?
No. Yes.
So at some point, we were told that the conditional use plan would have stormwater management above and beyond compared to the by right plan. So I'm curious whether the calculations that you've done here are based on the bare minimum for the requirements by Radnor, or whether you're looking at numbers, are you going 20% higher, 10% higher, are you going above and beyond what is required?
Yeah, so and again, these are all preliminary numbers, right? We still have to finish final the design. They may change, but the intent right now is that for instance, the 2-year storm, we exceeded the code by, I think it was 87%. So we would be allowed to discharge 1.6 CFS, and we were discharging 0.2, right? And so we were discharging, 87% less. For the 100-year storm, we were permitted to discharge 20, and we were discharging just under 12, right? So the intent was going well beyond what the code required.
So these are plans. Have any of your plans failed in reality, in actual?
As far as
Any of the plans that
projects
you've done,
that we've worked on that have been
or that
implemented?
the township has done as well.
I have not been involved in a project that has failed. The systems, I'm trying to think of any even, not even failure, just really issues. I have not been privy to any of those issues.
So, if someone else came up with their data and their plan, could this be disputed in any way?
I don't see, we're far exceeding any rates. We're trying to make everything as conservative as
I'm
possible.
sure you are, I'm not saying you're
Yeah,
not.
no. But yeah, no, we're trying to make everything
We
as
just wanna make sure you
conservative
get
as
it
possible.
right.
Yeah, no.
Right?
If I can add in, just so folks know, so when the township receives the land development plan, there's a whole host of reviews that are done. There's a subdivision land development ordinance, zoning ordinance, and a stormwater management ordinance. We use an outside firm, along with an over-staff review, that's me, to review the stormwater management calculations. So what Mr. Lambert is talking about, what will be posted, the stormwater calcs for a project like this are about this thick. And our consultant doesn't just go through and check the boxes. They actually check the calculations. They actually run it to make sure. So you have an objective third party that reviews not just the stormwater management, but all the other things in the development. So I want you to know, we're checking just like you want us to check. And I hope that provides some level of
So what happened
comfort.
with the property, Mpds property, across the street on Stratford Avenue?
The Benson properties, you mean? The
Yeah,
Benson
what happened there? Because we understand there was an issue there, according to the landowner, the
So
homeowner.
what I can tell you there is, again, we had inspectors on the site. There's stormwater management on the site for the new buildings that were built. That was installed correctly, tied in correctly. So when somebody says anecdotally there's a problem, it's very hard for me to respond. I don't know, is Mr. Lambert attribute to what storm was it? Because all systems have a limit, and we've had some storms in recent times that are that 1% or greater, right, that have occurred that are. So from our inspectors on site, there is stormwater management for each house. There is actually a basin in the rear of those homes. I'm unaware of something that's not functioning properly. What I can tell you is the property met our ordinance. And without knowing a specific of other than
Well, he's
something's
not here.
wrong, it's hard for me to
Yeah,
judge
he's
that.
not here tonight, but.
Steve, the ordinance, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
How updated is that ordinance? Is it
The stormwater management ordinance is from 2005.
2005?
And just so, I don't want to get back to Mr. Lambert, but there's a lot of the requirements in our ordinance. We have rate control, we have infiltration requirements. This was all dictated to the townships through Act 167 that came down to us, and they said, you have to be at least this stringent or more. So you'll see there's a lot of similarities in various townships' ordinances. Different, interdifferent. Everybody has the right to change theirs. So a lot of what we have is common. It was done on a watershed basis, which is how we like to do those things. I don't want to take up any more time. I'm going to give it back to your
Would those
question.
calculations be accurate for today in the circumstances?
15 years old.
That's right. It is 15 years old. So
Exactly.
we have the science, and we go by the ordinance, right? So I can't.
Understand.
That's how we have to have, and there's many townships that do.
But would that lend itself to a
So you're asking
assessment?
whether it's accurate, and I'll ask for correction from the engineers,
Current
but
is probably a better word, current.
yeah, what I would suggest is that weather patterns are changing, and what we think of as a 100-year storm, in the sense that it is only going to happen 1% of the time, is probably more common now, and it's more likely to occur than what you would have seen in 2006, which parenthetically, I'll say, might have something to do with the fact that people view the new homes that are being built that are properly controlled as the cause of the additional stormwater runoff. There's really just additional rain that occurs. There may also be poorly maintained systems, but it's not being helped any by the additional rain. So parenthesis over. The fact that the 100-year storm might happen 3 times a year doesn't really change the effectiveness of the stormwater management controls. It can handle a certain amount of water that's going to come down at a given time. But if you say there's going to be 12 cubic feet of runoff, not 12 cubic, how many were? 12 cubic feet per second
Yeah.
of runoff in a 100-year storm. You guys here, once every 100 years, I'm going to have 12 cubic feet per second coming off this property. When in reality, the numbers have changed. It's not once every 100 years. You're going to get that once every 6 months.
And actually, to follow up on your question about failure and his question about storms is, everyone knows we've had these crazy storms where, high intensity in a short amount of time. And we work with a lot of institutional clients that we're constantly working with and have done, a dozen projects with them. And so we're aware of what's happening on their campus and know if a system that was put in had a problem. And where we see the problems on the campuses or properties is actually where we haven't done projects. And so where there haven't been projects, these storms are creating problems. But where there are stormwater measures in place, and I should knock on wood, they have not had problems, and the systems have functioned properly and have not had issues that I've seen or been called out to take a look at. And I can guarantee most of those clients would call me the first thing the next morning.
Let me ask you a question. I just said that the 100-year storm is going to happen more frequently. And I'll divide this question into 2 parts. If the 100-year storm occurs, it's been dry for a while, the soil is basically free from water, then it's a 100-year storm. Would it end up putting out more or less water under your development plan with the stormwater management system?
If the soil's under, let's call it normal conditions. I don't want to call it super dry because that has other impact. But if it's under kind of a normal, healthy condition, I think that you have that one storm and you're going to have less runoff. If you have a 100-year storm one week and a 100-year storm the following week, which an area of Lower Merion did a few years ago, that second storm is going to generate more runoff just because you may still have a saturated soil in that system when that storm starts.
Is there a scenario, and you're kind of getting into the second half of my question there, is there a scenario in which the system becomes fully waterlogged and
So
it's essentially no longer controlling stormwater?
So the regulatory requirements is to drain the systems within 24 hours. And so they want the systems dry. I believe actually Mpds allows you to go to 72, but to allow you 72 hours to have that system fully dry to basically prepare yourself for that next storm. So it is a system that is fully functional. And I think one of the things with the regulation when they passed it is my theory behind some of it is they've done it because some people look at the numbers and say, how could regulation require that this site not have any discharge during a storm? I think some of the regulation is actually to cure past ills, right? So it's to cure the issue that right now all these areas have no stormwater, right? And what happens is to over-control the stormwater from a site that gets developed to actually have less, because they know that all these properties are not going to have stormwater for quite some time, most likely. There is no reach back that they've gone to. Radnor has a stormwater fee, which is actually looking to address, let's not call it a reach back, but address some of the stormwater issues. And by looking at it in Radnor there might be areas, and unfortunately this graphics isn't the right graphic, but I'm going to use this anyway, an area where if you have properties that all don't have stormwater, that they will put in a stormwater facility at some point, and they've been collecting a fee to be able to build up enough money to be able to build a system in a location. And there's lots of study and discussion and debate about where that goes, and we'll leave that out of it. But
I think we appreciate what you're saying. I think, but what I heard is that climate's changing, regulations are old, and so that's my takeaway.
The regulation isn't old, right? So in addition to all the township, we do have the Mpds regulation, which is layered on top of it, that is continuously evolving. They changed regulation on January 1, right? And so they are continuously evolving the regulation. The regulation that Radnor has is current regulation. You know, what they're requiring is current regulation. It's not like it's outdated. You know, you're not driving a 1972 Chevy, right? It is a current regulation, and that's what you're seeing in most municipalities around. It's, you know,
Maybe
a
I'm talking
filtration
about the
requirement
definition of
rate.
current, but.
Yeah.
But
It's
it
long.
sounds like things are dated, and road weather's
But-
changed. I just want to make sure we're up to date, even though there are these over layers of regulation that could and should, intend to minimize the situation.
So I'm going to just jump in for the ordinance. So our ordinance isn't bad, right? It's not old to the point where you can't use it. It is adequate. It is, like Mr. Lambert said, very consistent with a lot of other townships. So your level of comfort should be with the NPDES requirements, which are above this, which he said is layered on. That's the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. Anything over an acre is required to do that. So if there is concern that our ordinance is dated, and I don't really think there should be a huge concern with that, literally they just changed everything, they just updated that ordinance. So there should be comfort there. If you're not comfortable with our ordinance, the NPDES should make you more comfortable. And I'm not speaking on behalf of the developer, I'm speaking as one of your staffers. That should give you some comfort if that's what
What
you're
would it take
concerned
for
with.
the ordinance to be revised in order to meet current conditions?
So the ordinance doesn't really need to be revised in order to meet anything. I think that what I would like to do is to revise the ordinance in order to more accurately define what a 100-year storm is. But for purposes of the conversation that we're having today, as I hear it, and remember, I'm not an engineer, I'm not vouching for this, that's why we have Steve and a lot of other people who will actually look at this, but the claim that's being made is, by making the stormwater management facilities, the developer will end up making this site better than it is right now, even post-development. And what you're saying is it's going to be significantly better.
The other thing to hit on, the evolving rainfall, right? Because what you're really saying is we're getting different rainfall, right? The rainfall, the township code is constantly evolving in that aspect, that it's based on the NOAA rainfall charts. And so it's not a static number to say you're gonna, it's I don't know how often NOAA updates their table, Steve may know, but it is based on different rainfall. It wasn't based necessarily the 2005, it's whatever the latest NOAA was.
Right, so we have a chart which is talking about the intensity, duration, frequency chart that's in our ordinance. But what they're using is not that chart. They're using the more updated one today.
Well, I mean, I'm in the finance business. I can make a model look any way I want it to look like, right? And for investors, I work with private equity firms, strategic buyers and stuff, so I could set my own assumptions, I can build a model, and I can make it jump through hoops or swim through wherever I
So
need
again,
to.
I'm not pro, anti, for, or against this development, right? I'm your engineer, right? And what I can tell you is, so first off, I got to check what I did with my retirement fund after you told me that. A little concerned now, but so we have our engineering firm. So they're going to hand us that phone book of calculations. That's our job to make sure that the assumptions were correct. Because in every model, there are assumptions, right? There are points that you have to.
Absolutely.
That's our job to make sure that occurs. We don't believe or disbelieve anybody. We run the calculations. We run models. We look at those drainage areas. We will not just say, oh, that looks good. We will calculate what we feel is the drainage area. And you can see a comment in one of our stormwater reviews. Drainage area B17 is listed at 2.3 acres. We measured at 3.7. Fix the discrepancy. So I don't want you to get hung up on their calculations, because ultimately my department is responsible to make sure those calculations are correct. And if you look at any of our reviews online, which they are for every planning commission meeting, under stormwater, you will see comments, some large, some small. So just for the sake of time, I don't want everybody to get hung up on the review. They can do whatever they want to do with their model.
Yeah.
We're here to check it.
I get it.
So just, you've worked in Tredyffrin before, I'm just curious, since I'm less familiar with Radnor's ordinance, would this pass our ordinance?
I haven't done a full analysis, but your ordinance allows us to count the stone around the pipe. And so I believe that we would easily meet your ordinance.
Is that something you could check? Not right this second, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah, I can't run the model now,
Just
but-
so that we can have
Right.
a more direct comparison.
Yep. I'm gonna skip you. You've already had your turn.
Go forward a slide, please. Oh, the one with the development. There we go. All right, so where you got your basins, you got your one that's going to capture forest. If you come up on the Grant Lane, you got right there, yes. That is topographically the lowest point on the property. Would you agree?
So I believe it's actually this corner.
Oh, well, it
Right.
flows, if you start on Eagle Road,
Yes.
yep,
Yeah.
water rolls down.
And so we were proposing to actually add a
That's
add a
where I'm
berm
at.
and swale here to be able to capture this blue area. And this blue area is all going to this basin right here.
Can you speak to what that basin is? It looks like it's a surface basin rather than.
So that was that a
subsurface?
Yeah, it's going to be an underground bed.
It is underground?
Yeah.
Because you didn't define that as a basin. That is the lowest point, and you're probably doubling the impervious
Yeah.
surface that's right there. What's currently where your townhomes are the trees, land.
Yeah,
So
where the townhouses. So this is the turnaround that's in front of the house
Right.
that's there, right? So you have the turnaround and the driveway. So this is the driveway to the house, the turnaround, and then the driveway going out. I think there's a garage back here. But here in that is, in addition to collecting all the roof drains, just to put them underground and get them over to the basin, we were made aware of the concern over here
Right.
of directing that water. In my observation, all of these are super flat when they were built. Some of the driveways, like I don't know how it drains, quite frankly, when I looked at some of the driveways. And so knowing that is we can direct that water, and we have the ability to, down to this basin to be able to control that. And that was one of the design features, to cut that water off that you get now.
Well, it just, if you're truly trying to control the water flow of that property, I live on Grant.
Yeah,
I can
so-
tell you all that water
So looking
from
at
Eagle
this-
flows downhill.
Yeah, so
So
looking
put
at
your
this,
catch basin-
this front, from looking at the grades and walking the site, it looks like this front area really kind of runs through, I'm not sure, I can't read who's ever the corner there, kind of runs through, and you can tell me if I'm right or not, runs through the property there. And for these areas, again, I wasn't sure exactly how some of these drain, but it looks like this goes to this direction here and kind of runs down through the backyards here. Was my observation.
Without getting too much into the site plan, when all these properties, there is a natural slope to the land from Eagle all the way down. Are you leveling it? Was that taken into consideration?
So there's a ridge. So Eagle's low, right?
Eagle's high.
Eagle's low through here. There's
On the road, but we're on the
there's a
property.
slope. There's a slope right here, and it comes up to about a high point right here. From this point, it starts sloping down this way.
So are you?
There will be grading throughout the whole site, but we will try to, it will mimic, if we go back to that slide there. So we are, there'll be grading for kind of each component of it to be able to get it in, but we are going to be grading really the whole site.
And then how does that grading go into your stormwater calculation? If you don't know what the grading is yet, how can you, because grading's going to change the velocity and flow of the water, correct?
It will not, the slopes that we're changing are not going to have a substantive impact. We're really directing into the basins. We're doing mostly pipe conveyance, not as much surface conveyance. Surface conveyance, you get a lot more slope impact to that. Using the pipe conveyance, there is some nominal change to it, but you're really looking at about, for all these drainage areas, a time of concentration of less than 5 minutes for, really probably all the areas under development.
Let's head over here and then back there.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you have a plan for the other area as well?
Yes, we haven't gotten there yet. I was hoping to move on to that, but the majority of the room when they first came in was for this particular area. I think there were a couple people there, but we will get there.
I'm interested in the other side.
Is it my understanding that that pink area will not be drained well,
So that pink area is vastly reduced.
vastly reduced. What does that mean? Does that mean the water still?
So this means that this is how much water, and I don't have the exact number here, but this is how much water, or drainage area, I should say, gets down. And looking at Stratford, it looks like when you get about here in Stratford, most of the water runs across, just downhill the driveway there, it starts to get rutted out.
That's right.
Right?
And that's where I live.
Okay.
So the water's going to continue.
So I'm gonna answer your question here in 1 second, right? So you see all this area that's currently getting there that runs down to this intersection there that we talked about. We're now reducing a lot of that to vastly reduce the amount of area that can drain to your property. We have a small corner here of really landscape area that is going to continue to drain in that direction. We've cut off most of Stratford that drains in that direction and the substantive part of this property.
So who in the end will be responsible if that continues to be overpowering water? Radnor Township, or you're not going to be? Is that what you're saying?
We're going to control. We're actually adding an inlet that wouldn't be required to Stratford Avenue to help address that condition.
So in other words, you're telling me our front lawn will not be covered with water?
I cannot tell you that because we only contribute a small percentage of the water to where that will, and when this project's done, we're going to contribute an even smaller amount. But I cannot speak to the fact that it appears that, and I'm not sure when you came in, but it appears that there's a low spot right here, and this
Yes,
pond's
there is.
during rain.
There's a little pond there at the corner.
Right?
That's ours.
So that was my observation walking the site. There's a ridge right here in Grant, and it looks like it ponds right there. I can't tell you that the remainder of this area, right? We're really just going to have, we talked about, we're really just going to have lawn, right? There's, I guess, your house here,
Yes.
driveway, a portion of the house next to you, if they have their driveway, part of Stratford that's all still draining there, we can't impact that. We will be reducing the amount of water that this site contributes to that corner.
What would an underground stormwater cost for you?
What would it cost? That's a great question. For us,
I didn't do the analysis for your property.
Is that Radnor's issue now?
So I guess that's for me.
Yeah.
The township has I'm going to say, moral obligation to all of its residents. We do not have a financial obligation for stormwater that is not created by the township. So while we're absolutely going to continue to work on all of the stormwater problems that we have in West Wayne, North Wayne, the First Ward, the Fourth Ward, everywhere, irrespective of whether this project goes forward, whether it's successful, whether it's unsuccessful, there's not really a lawsuit to be had against the township, or you can't compel the township to just specifically fix your property. And I kind of get the sense of one of the questions that's been lingering out there, if all of this ends up being wrong, either because it's snake oil, sorry, Rob, or if because it's honestly intended, but just the weather goes crazy, who knows? There potentially is a claim in nuisance for the individual homeowners against both the homeowners association for the new development, which would have responsibility for running the stormwater management facilities, and for the individual homeowners who are increasing the problem, but that's the key word, you actually have to be increasing the problem. If ultimately the changes decrease runoff, but just not as much as everybody hopes, you really would not have a plan. And then, of course, you're also left with the issue of what specifically are your damages going to be for you're in an area that already gets a lot of stormwater, and now it gets either the same amount or marginally more or marginally less. What are the damages for that? So I'm not your guys' lawyer. I urge you all to speak with counsel on your own. In fact, as part of the conditional use process, you probably want to consult your counsel of your choice.
That's one of my questions I can ask.
But I would suggest that we're probably not going to have a good solution for you, at least at the township level, and realistically not at the individual level either, for what if this doesn't do all the wonderful things that are promised.
I'm not sure if I have this right, but certainly the numbers before and after runoff look pretty impressive. But it seems to me, from your description, that all the runoff from all those basins was going to be collected and sent into the forest lane system at one spot, And what does that mean for what's going into that system from that point discharge?
So right now, a lot of the water, we propose to connect to the forest system, let's say approximately at the intersection of Fairfield and Forest, right? This property that we're going to remove the house and leave that as an open area. To be able to connect the stormwater out to that forest system. Right now, all of this property, now some of it kind of runs down through here, really winds up running through this gentleman's property. I know he was at the last meeting. Oh, yep, there you go. I was going to say,
Thank you.
ran right through that
No problem,
property.
Jack, I got you.
Before it gets to that same collection system. And so we might be picking it up, 100 feet uphill of where it currently gets into the system. But looking at this, I imagine that there's probably water flowing on both sides of the house in a heavy storm coming down there, and that we were proposing to really just connect here instead of, I think there's an inlet right here. Correct. All the water enters that system in that inlet anyway.
Is there any way to redirect that water from going on Forest to outletting on Eagle? Right. As opposed to overwhelming the system that's already right.
So we're reducing, I wouldn't call it overwhelming, we're reducing the system, right? Is the system sufficient is kind of another question, but Forest has a structural issue as a road, right? It has a low spot right here, right? And the high spot's here. When this system is at capacity, it fills up this area here before it either spills out through the driveways. Gentleman was talking about that actually, gets over the weir, as he was referring to it, of Forest before it gets out to Old Eagle School Road. So there is a low spot here in the system. We are, what we talked about before is we're cutting the amount of water that we're getting to that in half, right? So we're reducing the water that gets to that existing infrastructure by half.
How?
By putting our stormwater systems in.
But even with removing.
I don't follow that though. If the ground can only absorb so much, and you're collecting more surface area water and bringing it underground and directing it onto Forest Lane, how are you cutting it in half?
So we are infiltrating water into the ground for volume, but rates, it's all these stormwater systems control the rates. And think of a giant bathtub. And if you fill that giant bathtub with a fire hose, but had your drain out at the bottom, you're still going to get the amount of water coming out the bottom, but the tub's going to fill up, right? And that's kind of what these systems are, right? We look at these large pipe systems, and so these pipe systems are going to fill with water, right? So a 2-year storm, and I don't have all the numbers right in front of me, but a 2-year storm might only fill this system to right here, right? Where the 100-year storm is filling it up to the top of the pipe. We talked about that Radnor doesn't let us count the stone around it, right? So in actuality, a 2-year storm may just get to the bottom of the pipe, and after it seeps out through the perforations. And a 100-year storm may not even get to the top. It might be to here, right? So there's extra capacity in that. And then there might be, I don't have, again, all the calculations, a 4-inch orifice out of the bottom of it. So you have all these big pipes holding back the water, filling up as the runoff happens, and then you just have a small pipe coming out of it. And that small pipe is what's leading to the downstream systems.
So you're not reducing you're just extending the flow over time.
We're changing the rate, right? We're reducing the rate. We do have a volume control, right? But we are controlling the rate of runoff as it discharges.
But you're also introducing more water below grade
We are
than
infiltrating.
you would normally see.
We are, what the regulation wants you to mimic is basically a 2-year storm, for a 2-year storm for a meadow. So what they want to say is, if you made this whole site a meadow, how is your runoff characteristic? How much water is actually naturally getting down into the ground? And that's what we mimic for our infiltration. So that 2-year storm, right, we're mimicking that to get the water to infiltrate back into the ground.
Okay, so you're gonna have more water than what's currently being introduced into the ground. You're bringing it in at 6 feet below grade.
It's going to be a comparable amount for the 2-year storm for what's there today.
Without those pipes, without your stormwater collection system, the water runs across the surfaces, fills up all the low areas, and then just continues on. Now you're going to be surcharging the soil, saturating the soil. We talked about it earlier, we all have a water table problem. So when we see a storm come and go, for weeks afterwards, everyone's sump pump runs continuously because it's sucking the water out of the soil.
That's what I commented to you, is that
you're surcharging the soil.
Where forest is lower, right? We're only going to go back, right? I don't know where everybody lives, but this area is lower. It's probably 15 feet lower than this site. And there is a groundwater. You said you can see the level in your basement where the groundwater issue is, and that seasonally that groundwater goes up and down, right? Is what your comments were before the meeting. We are mimicking, again, going back to that 2-year storm. So we can count 80% of the impervious as it exists, and then 20% as meadow. But then you have all the lawn and everything else. And so there's water getting currently infiltrated into the ground up here. Even though we don't have a stormwater system, right? There's just water that naturally gets into the ground and seeps back into that water table, just like, I don't have a huge blow up, right? But, this whole area is, there's areas that are influencing that groundwater. And then there's a stream down over here. And so as you get closer and closer to that stream, a typical condition is that groundwater is coming up and coming out to the surface where that stream is. And so the amount of water that we are infiltrating here, I have not done a whole study on it, but just thinking about the areas and where we're infiltrating and how much we're infiltrating, I think that we will have a minimal impact, if any, perceptible impact on that groundwater.
We've taken what you're proposing is going to take a lot of the surface water off of the surface.
It's controlling it in a basin, and so we're infiltrating a certain amount into the ground for that 2-year storm, mimicking natural conditions, right? And then we are then discharging that into a pipe to connect to that pipe system.
But they're not natural conditions, they're conditions that don't exist right now. You're putting more water into the soil that the rest of us downhill are going to have to be dealing with. So we won't see that flash flood as often, maybe, but we're going to have damp basements forever because the ground is
I disagree. I think that the damp basement issue is a groundwater issue, which is a much broader basis of where that groundwater is and the depth of the groundwater than the volume of water that we're infiltrating here. If you're saying that this entire area right here has a groundwater, that fluctuates feet, right? Sometimes of the year it's below your basement, sometimes of the year it's above your basement. Let me look at the areas here, right? So we had, the area of A, let's see here, A3 was 292,000 square feet. The area of A1 is 333,000, square feet. A2, right, it was 154. Just between those two, we have 700,000-800,000 square feet, right? And that groundwater is most likely under all of that area, kind of going up and down. And so the amount of water that we would infiltrate here has a de minimis impact on that groundwater.
If you don't want stormwater going into the ground, I can solve that problem for you very simply, just by saying let's not put stormwater management controls. But then you'll have all the stormwater going over the plant. And to some extent, you have to choose between the two. Water's got to go somewhere. They can't put it all in a pot the rest of the time. We go back here to the back.
Can you go to the, keep going on to stay and stop. Right there. Okay. So I might be missing something. I'm sure it's clearly obvious to everybody else. So can you tell me can you use your pointer and tell me where that inlet is by Joe Shooter's place between Forest Lane and Fairfield? There's an inlet.
It's right by the T.
Right where the...
Right there.
Right in
so
here.
Just to oversimplify it, all the stuff in the teal area, the Hamilton project, right, is all going to get funneled downstream towards where it says forest. That's an oversimplification.
So Correct.
Pretty much?
Let me go to the proposed, right? So this,
Yeah, that's
this
the
teal
proposed,
area.
that's the slide I want. Okay.
Yeah.
So all of
It's
that
going
in
to
the
get
teal is
here.
gonna come to there. Okay, so I'm not a water guy. Have you guys thought about flipping it over? This is a Radnor project. Why not put all the, why are you making Forest Lane in Fairfield worse? That's already an issue, which 90% of everybody in that green is TE. No offense, this is a Radnor project. Why not put it out towards Eagle? Have you guys looked at that?
So, two things is one, we're not making forest worse. We're actually making it better. We're reducing the amount of runoff getting to forest. Two is it's a much broader. Steve mentioned watersheds, right? This is a ridge line, right? And we have to respect when we do our Mpds permit and all these other regulatory bodies, we have to respect the ridge lines. We cannot move water. A substantive amount of water. We're modifying it a little bit over here, but we cannot move this water from here to there with our Mpds permits without.
Why?
Because they look at what's called a point of interest, right? And so they're going to look at, when they review our permits, they're going to look at it and say, okay, where does your site drain today, right? And they're going to say your site drains right here, right? And they're going to say what gets to there, and they're going to look at it and say, okay, what gets there after your development? And so they look at it from a pre to post at a point of interest.
But you're going underground, so why would that matter?
Because they look at it from the watershed, right? So you have, the Darby Cobbs Creek watershed. So they're looking at it for the entire watershed of what water feeds and supplies the Darby Creek. And how does that water impact the watershed?
Redirecting the water to the far right as opposed to the bottom left is not an option legally, or it is an option?
I don't see that it's an option under the Mpds regulation.
Okay, and the follow-up question I have is, your data sounds great. I hear you. We're not accusing you of misrepresenting the data. The question I have is, let's just say more rain, the project doesn't work. Steve misses a couple things. You had the best intent. You might have missed a couple things. People make mistakes. I get it, right? 5 or 10 years from now, this plan does not work. If you're one of us, what is our point of return to go after the township or to the developer or what have you? What would we do if we just say, you know what, they had the best intent. It's no fault to you. Your data was what it was. But what happens if it just doesn't work? If you're one of us, what do you do after that point?
So that goes to what I had talked about before, and like I led with before, I think that Radnor Township, and I think probably Julie and Murph would agree with me, different township also have moral obligations to their residents. But in terms of what can you do in terms of coercing in a court of law the township to fix your problem, prioritize your problem, God willing, 5 years from now, I will not be in this job anymore, which means that you may have a different commissioner. Not you, because I know you're from Tradifferent, but the Radnor folks. You may have someone who just doesn't make this a priority, and that would be unfortunate. The short answer to your question is I don't think that you will have a clear remedy. Your remedy will be to go to your local government and just try and make them solve the problem for you. But parenthetically, I will tell you, and Steve, you can correct me, this is what we would be doing to try and correct the problem. We wouldn't be building a whole bunch of townhouses in addition, but these underground basins are the kinds of things that we would be doing in this area in order to fix the problem.
So to the commissioner's point, we don't always just want to convey stormwater, right? We want to reduce the stormwater. So in what he put forth in that theory, when we look at stormwater management issues, the first thing we do is say, what can we do upstream to reduce those flows? So like a little bit east or right where it says Forest Lane, years ago in Tradifferent, there was a small storm sewer project on there. There's no stormwater management. That was just the installation of inlets in that low area and a pipe that extended.
And they missed the spot, Steve, because if you guys were doing that job, I came out in the yard and they asked them what they were doing. They should have put that drain about 30 feet into my yard, and it would have solved most of that water.
But you're in Radnor, right?
Yeah,
Sorry.
so I'm not getting into that. I mean, we stay within the right of way. Okay.
I'm sorry,
so-
we're suffering with the problem.
No, but there's certain limitations any township has into it, but the commissioner's right. The first thing we look at is reduction upstream of that, of any point of interest. And then from there, you start to work at, okay, there's reduction, there's conveyance, so what you put forth is correct.
I mean, we have stormwater facilities that are basically the same as these. They're big pipes and gravel beds that we allow to infiltrate with water. And this is what we do. All the way in the back.
I just want to know, we're a little over an hour in. I think we've got to start talking about the other property too. So.
I have one question to ask that's relative to all of this, is those stormwater systems that we put in, can we speak to the longevity and durability and like a little bit more about, you know, the 10-year, 15-year lifespan of those systems? I don't have any sense for that. I actually work in commercial construction, and I just don't know.
Yeah, so
Put these things in.
what's shown here is actually plastic pipe, and plastic pipe has actually increased the longevity tremendously of these systems.
Yeah, it doesn't go
What?
It doesn't go away ever, right?
No.
What about
Yeah.
the clogging with silt and so forth? How do you actually get in and clean that system out?
So there is an operations and maintenance agreement that's part of the development agreement that the applicant will have to sign. That will go with the deed of the property to the HOA. So one of the other things we look at is how a system can be cleaned. Our Drossen has massive systems. They're different, and yet we make sure that there is a way to get into them. Similarly here, and there's companies that make a very lucrative living that run hoses and brush and take care of this. So especially this diameter pipe, or what he's proposing, that's what occurs.
It's basically cleaning out the pipes themselves, though, I guess, right?
Correct.
That's effectively what it is.
And there are inspection requirements for it, so when the system fails, it would have to be a replacement.
Thank you.
Also, you got your O&M operations and maintenance agreement. You know, that's great, but somebody's gotta pay for it. So I'm just thinking, I know as long as you guys own it, then it's yours. As long as you're in control of the HOA, it's the HOA's. But I've been on both sides of this in real estate. One as a, real estate attorney, building HOAs and escrow agreements. You gotta have enough escrow. You gotta have a major league escrow agreement or a nice escrow agreement, depending on the project, to make sure that you have money down the road for the HOA to pay the people who are gonna do the independent third-party inspection to prepare the reports so Steve and his successor can read them. So, I mean, I assume that's gonna be worked into if you go forward with the project and if things proceed as anticipated, that would be part of the, and especially since this is a conditional use agreement, that would certainly be
Application, not agreement.
Conditional use application and a conditional use project, that sort of escrow arrangement going forward for the maintenance, since the residents are concerned about this maintenance. So
We'd love to see that, but just to give people comfort, if we come in and do the maintenance, because we get to, if it's not done, the agreement that you would have to sign would give us the authority to come in. We just lien the properties.
that's great. That's great, Jack. I agree with you. I know, but I don't know.
We do it.
You do it well.
We do it. I know not.
But that's like, to me, I look at that, we can talk about that offline. That's sort of like
How
the
easy is
last
it to get
thing
the
that you
government?
do. That's the last thing you do.
We do it a lot. I'm really aggressive. I'm not
But you're not gonna be here in 5 years.
Well, that's true.
After I found out about my retirement account, I'll be here, so I'll make sure we get it done.
You lean your resident HOAs aggressively, is that, that's good.
You make me do your work for you? Yes, I will.
Yeah, but we like to have the money in place.
Yeah, but the Commissioner's right, from direction of the board to the manager to staff, we have done that.
Well, that's great. That's to me, that's an end game. But it's nice to have
That's
the
the
money
insurance
available.
policy.
So,
Pardon me?
That's an insurance policy. We want to know.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. But you know that stopgap measure is always there.
Why don't we move on to the next piece? Let's pause the questions. We'll come back to them, I promise.
So we look now at the north side of Stratford. page north. So Stratford's across the bottom, Hedgerow is off to the left-hand side, West Ave off to the top, and Eagle Road on the right-hand side. When we were studying this, the interesting thing that we found was that Hedgerow really receives water from the existing properties along Stratford, along with a portion of Stratford that runs down through Hedgerow. This house at the end kind of runs across the front here, and then there's a pipe that runs underneath right here, and then I think there's actually a pipe that connects, and it ultimately comes out close to Beech Tree. Is where all this water in this area goes. The area in green, the B3 area, which was West Ave, if you look, the existing office building here has a large parking lot in the building, and there's a little like riprap area at the corner of the parking lot that comes down to Eagle Road, and all that really came running down, and it appeared that it crosses the road, makes this corner, and runs down through West Ave, where the subject property, which is right here and has this small light going out to Stratford, really is almost a little bit self-contained, with the exception of going through the rear of, when it drains, the property right here, where that currently drains through. So that was just showing where that was. There we go. And here, so what this is showing is, building a cul-de-sac, and then you have the 9 houses, and the reaction to it is wow, that looks really busy. It's really busy with this stormwater. We have an enormous amount of stormwater, or a lot of stormwater over here. We had, basins for each of these properties, be able to collect both the new road going in and the improvements from the houses, so the driveway, anything related to that, all gets directed. And so each homeowner will have their own stormwater. And so where I think a couple of these are the ones that people referred to, they have their own stormwater. All of these properties would have their own stormwater controls, and then a small discharge out the bottom there.
Those stormwater controls are designed for the 100-year storm?
Correct.
Where is it getting discharged?
So we did infiltration over there also, and we were able to infiltrate it. And looking at it is over there. Let's see here, the 2-year storm. I just want to put everything in perspective, right? So this was, the 2-year storm was 8 cubic feet per second. And again, this really doesn't impact our property at all, but we were doing the numbers, versus 33 for a 100-year storm. B3 was 7 for a 2-year and 32 for the 100-year. The area here for area B2 was 3 for the 2-year and 17 for the 100-year, and post there was, again, it was a very small number for the 2-year. It was point something, right? So it was under 1, and between 1 and 2 for the 100-year. So we went from 17 to 2, right? So reducing the amount of runoff dramatically there.
I just wanted to say that when Mrs. Hamilton cut down all the trees there around 2008, the erosion from that property into my yard, you can see it from the fence. The fence used to be underground, and now it's like a foot. The deer goes over there, and I have pictures of it, the water coming down, and I talked to Radnor, the engineer at the time. I'm not sure if it was Mr. Marcini or not, and he said that nothing could be done, of course, until someone developed the property.
So which property are you, just so I know?
I am where all the water goes.
You're right here with the end of Hedgerow?
I am, yes. I mean, I don't want to, I'm just concerned that my yard gets totally flooded now, ever since all the trees got down. It's just gotten a lot worse. And, I feel like I have Lake Hedgerow on the back.
It also caused the falling down of one tree.
Yeah, the walnut.
That hit the property. So we get a lot of water down at the end of Intro. The drain is at my property. I had to put that drain in. I had to put that drain in. I had to clear out the pipe as far as I could go. all myself because these guys wouldn't do it. And so I had to put in a stormwater system. And so, it's working okay right now, but I don't know if it's going to continue to work with your development.
Yeah, I mean, I'm planning on putting something in just because I can't take it anymore.
You know, if everybody put something in, I think that a lot of the stormwater issues would go away. You know, the proposed plan reduces the water dramatically.
We put one in as well, and I'm between Mark and Cindy, and we still have water in front of our properties. So.
And that's recent.
There's only 4 houses on that street.
We've been there for 30 years, right?
Yeah.
25, 30 years?
Yeah.
Last 5, 6, 7 years. When that thing went down.
Well, I live at the end of West on the cul-de-sac, and I'm contiguous to the property. Yeah.
There?
Not the bigger property, yeah, just a little bit up.
This one?
Yeah. And big difference. I've been there 15 years. And a big difference when the trees were cut down in the houses. I have a picture of my son standing on a little puddle. It's huge now, huge. All in the back corner, where I have a shed and it's rotting. I just don't see this helping that situation at all.
So this would be cutting off, so anything on that side is, you know, with the proposed plan, you know, so this would, you know, be a curved road, so we're going to cut off any water running in that direction and be able to put it into stormwater basins on site.
So you think the curb's going to stop it?
The curb will stop runoff. You know, from the area between the curb and the property line, yes, you're going to get water running, but then you know, we've cut off the lion's share of the water there.
So I'm from North Wayne. I'm on West Beach Street, and we've been talking about this. I've seen studies going back, 40, 50 years from the 70s. It's a really serious problem in North Wayne, the flooding issue. In the last decade, it's probably been the hottest topic on the township. We actually enacted a whole stormwater fee because of that, because it was going to be so expensive to mitigate this. And they're really struggling with all the problems, and we've been struggling to find economical and reasonable things to actually reduce it. The last thing we want to do is make it worse. And it seems like this is going to flow into that basin, right? Into the North Wayne Basin. This could go underneath and actually add to the problem.
So this is going to reduce runoff, and you know, some of the systems.
Well, I think those new houses also
please hear
have
me
those
out.
100 years.
I can't speak to the new houses. I did not do the design for those. I did not build them. I do not
I'm sure
know what they
would have
are.
said the same thing, right?
I looked at them. I did not see, when I looked at them and I heard there were issues, that's where I said I can't speak to it. I didn't hear a specific issue. What I just heard is that they've created all this runoff. I looked at the systems on each one of these lots. I did not see any particular area, and it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. But we go out and look at sites all the time, and there's an issue. And part of the things is kind of like forensic engineering. Where is it that is causing the problem? Where is it overflowing, right? And so I believe it was this house or maybe this one, it has an inlet right here. And typically, with the way, looking at the design, this system was designed that it would fill up, and then once it would fill up, it would just start to overflow. Well, typically when you see where these systems have failed or have issues, is that, something else is happening. Somebody didn't take out the inlet protection on it, and the inlet protection's full, and the water starts pouring over, right? Things that you look at is what's happening between that and going downhill, right? Water's going to flow downhill, right? And you would see leaf litter that's moved, you would see erosion, you'd see rocks exposed, things like that. I did not see evidence of that in the vicinity of that inlet. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, you may have looked at it, but
well, it also comes down Eagle into West and makes that curve, because where the bus stop is for the kids there, it's totally eroded.
I don't disagree with you, and that's what this is showing, right? So this is showing right here, this parking lot that's part of this office complex that has no stormwater control, right, is draining down. There's an area that they put in riprap, right? It shoots out down Eagle. At some point in here, I think it was, it kind of crosses, goes around and back out. And that's why this green area shows the way it is. That was just from our observation of where it looked like the water went.
Hey Jack, have you talked to Amtrak or SEPTA about, the water runoff there?
We were talking to Amtrak and SEPTA about a lot of different locations in the township. Help me out. Call them, email them, do whatever you can. It's like
Well,
talking to a
this is
brick
what
wall.
my attorney tells me. You guys need to do it, not me. They'll never return my phone call.
So
Don't return hours either.
So for North Wayne, what we were told, the reason, I mean, it's such an issue is because we kept on building, right? We kept on building houses where they probably shouldn't have over the years, and it just can't handle the natural flow from all that building. Now, let me just finish. Now we're talking about a place that had no impervious space today, and we're building more. We're adding a street, we're adding 9 houses, a cul-de-sac, that's all gonna lead, eventually, could lead into this again. We're trying to make it better, and this sounds like this could make it worse.
So 2 things. One is, you know, we are putting in the stormwater controls and reducing the amount of runoff from this site. So let's forget this project for a second. And this township said, you know what, this is the perfect spot to start to control stormwater. We can pick up this parking lot over here, and we're going to pick up something else. How are we going to control that stormwater? They're going to build a stormwater basin, right? Each one of these stormwater basins lists probably costs $50,000 to $100,000, right? So you're looking at about $1 million worth of stormwater going into this property as part of this development. The other side's, you know, probably double that. But you are actually taking and, you know, developing this site is actually going to improve the stormwater condition. If we started putting, you know, over on Beech Tree, if everyone started putting in a comparable stormwater system to what is proposed here, it would start solving a lot of the problems.
Except that
I do
you're
not have that
developing
background.
at the same time. So that would be true.
No, if you went and
were
retrofitted,
adding-
if you went and retrofitted each one of those houses with a stormwater
Yeah.
system, it
But
would
there
start.
are no houses there, so you're adding the houses too.
But we're actually reducing the runoff. Right?
I know,
So-
I'm just saying it's not, you're making it sound really rosy.
No, but what I'm saying is
Not quite.
you're actually
You're
using
taking out all the
you're
things.
actually using private funds to reduce the stormwater, right? So you're using, instead of using the public funds.
Have you told us the numbers for these?
Yeah, I did. It was.
Sorry.
It was 3. The pre-development was 3 for the 2 years, 17 for the post. There's a few percentage points on the post. 3 for the 2, 17 for the 100. The post was the 2 is a few percentage points. The 100 is between 1 and 2, right? So we're dropping.
Sorry, so it's 17 to 1 to 2?
Yes.
And it's 3 to.
3
a
to
few.
a few percentage points.
So, sorry for the skepticism, but we have stormwater basins in North Wayne. We've had issues with them, keeping them clean. We've actually explored making them bigger and, or, you know, building other ones, and we were told it's really not gonna make that much of a difference. I mean, for that size space, especially with the ones we have, it wasn't gonna make, for the amount of cost, it wasn't gonna make that much of a difference.
So for the opportunity to get the basins on a site, you know.
But we've had issues with the basins, how they've backed up.
I don't know which
Yeah,
basins, so I
again,
can't comment to
we're-
I can't comment to the basins you're referring, but these basins will have the same operation and maintenance agreements, you know, as the other site. They are going to be on individual parcels, but they will have the same maintenance and operation obligations.
Which means that unlike the North Wayne Basin, if we do have to go in and clean it out, we can lien somebody for it and get paid back, which will mean that it's a whole lot easier for the township to do it. I don't have to force through a $500,000 repair bill. Do you have any more slides that you want to get through here?
This was it. This was really it.
The street that you're gonna have, the entrance that goes from Stratford into the area that you wanna build, could you, wouldn't it be wise to put a stormwater in there that would just help, that would help the rest of the people down Stratford and Hedgerow? If you're saying most of the water is from water draining down the street, you're just showing us drains for the houses that you propose to build. What about that street? Right there, where it says B2, isn't that the street?
Yeah, so we would not pick up, even if we put an inlet all the way down here, we are not going to pick up a substantial amount of the water because Eagle Road's a state road, which makes it more complicated, but the water that's coming, you know, really right at this top, this shopping or the office complex that's here, is really coming down, and it's not crossing the road till it gets down.
No, I'm really looking, I'm talking about the shrimp colored area. B1? See where it says
T,
no?
Oh, here?
That's a road, isn't it?
No, that's just part of the property. We're not doing anything in that area.
The parcel has a weird little finger that sticks off
Okay,
of
well,
it at the
where is
bottom.
that? Where's that? Do
It's
you see
right
it?
next to the bed and breakfast, I think.
Yeah, so there's a new house right here, and then there's the strip, and then the bed and breakfast is right here.
Okay, which still, you couldn't fit anything in that little inlet room.
Not practically.
Where is the inlet going to go in Stratford? You said that you're going above and beyond, you said.
Yep.
Yeah.
You go the right way. So we were proposing an inlet on Stratford. Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. I know we had one here, right? Yep. And then tie into the. And then do we have one here?
On the road or on the property?
At the edge of the road. So basically, right along the road. So we'll need Radnor's permission to do that. But I'm presuming that they're going to say okay.
Don't a couple more softballs.
You don't even have to do the development.
And again, I just want to, so you said as the engineer, you said that Forest is a structurally flawed road, yet you're putting, I agree with Teddy. Eagle Road is much lower than that property. You should consider putting it out
we are
to
connecting
Eagle.
to the same drainage system that the property currently drains to.
Which you said is structurally flawed, because it has a low
with
point.
substantively less water into that drainage system.
We'll put something less water onto Eagle.
Because of the ridge.
Connecting,
Yeah, but you're
putting
digging
a lot
down 6
less
feet
in.
anyway. I mean, so you're already below
Putting a
ground.
lot less in. Yes, ma'am.
What about, one of the issues that seems to keep coming up, and I think you'll probably validate this, is as we go away from this and you drain the water away, let's say you get it on the Forest, we get backed up on Old Eagle School because PennDOT pipes are too narrow, and other issues like that downstream. Have you guys done any kind of study on your impact downstream and what else we can do to help that whole thing, that you're not going to make that all worse?
We've taken a look, at the slides that we've looked at here is kind of our local, near vicinity. We have not looked at where this pipe goes, where it crosses, I think by the CVS, comes out the other side and goes out by Calico Corner. We have not analyzed that. What we're demonstrating is that we are discharging substantively less water from this site post-development than pre-development.
And can I just, I feel like that's incorrect, but make sure I'm understanding. It's the same amount of water, it's just spread over a period of time, or are you actually reducing significantly the water?
We're infiltrating a certain amount of water, the increase in runoff from the 2-year storm. So we're infiltrating that into the ground, and then we're metering the flow of water after that. So the pipes are really the flow of water, right? They have nothing to do with volume, right? It's really just the capacity of it to convey water. And so by delaying that water and metering the rate that goes through, that pipe has capacity for other, it has capacity for other water, that's getting into it, and we're holding our water back, and then it's getting into it, and while it has capacity.
So eventually it'll go underneath.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, you said it's infiltrating a 2-year storm, right? But it's holding back the other water.
In this area, we're infiltrating the 2-year storm. In this area,
it's going to go under North Wayne.
The North Wayne, we're actually infiltrating in excess of the 2-year, just to other design constraints there. So we are infiltrating more there.
So he's talking about specifically the area of the township, which is North Wayne, not the northern parcel. Where ultimately, when you drain into the forest,
This goes out to Calico Corners, crosses underneath Route 30. I think it goes back behind Steve may know better
So
than I.
there's a culvert
No, I meant the
that
parcel, the
runs
smaller parcel
through
you
the
were
parking
talking
lot.
about.
There's a big culvert that goes under 30 through the parking lot, which was actually, part of that was redone when the Acme was going in there years ago. And that basically discharges, that culvert ends at Maison.
Yeah.
do either of these go into Gulf Creek eventually?
The north one does.
The north one does. will that increase or decrease the total, two different questions, will that increase or decrease the total amount of water that runs off into Gulf Creek?
Both. It'll reduce the rate and volume.
It will reduce both rate and volume. How do you reduce the total volume that runs off?
Infiltration.
Okay, so you're infiltrating more on site.
Correct.
Just one more question. You said it's infiltrating about 2 years, maybe a little bit more. Without any building on there, without any of the impervious space, how much is the infiltration now?
So on both sites are not exactly the same, right? So we've got a toolbox, right? And this one's up here. So I just want to clarify for everyone. You know, I'd say we have tools that we use for each site. So this site is not the same, you know, exact model that we're using on the other site. You know, we have other constraints. We are infiltrating more on the other site, on the other side, due to other constraints. So we actually have, I don't know what the storm is, but we are actually infiltrating a lot more on the other site. To answer your question.
My question was, I think you said earlier it was 2 years, maybe it's a little bit more.
It's going to be a lot more on the other side. But
if you don't have, for the other side, the slide that was on before, if you don't have any impervious space, how much is that getting infiltrated now today?
On the other site?
Yep.
So, you know, you have the initial abstractions that go in. I could do a calculation. I did not do that for this, but the runoff from that site for the 2 year was a 3 CFS for the 2 year and 17 for the 100 year. Sir.
Can you zoom in on the area A4? You have the two slides.
Yeah, I think I have. Yeah.
So that slide shows an area of pink on the northeast side of the site. The next slide shows that pink not going. In other words, you're changing the direction that water is moving, whether it's infiltration or underground or the way you're collecting it. But previously you said you can't change the behavior of the water because you couldn't touch the side that's towards Eagle Road, but yet you are doing it.
Yeah, so this is...
that water leaves the site.
This is a little bit of a break, right? So this area really kind of goes down this way and and way down, you know, the Conestoga the other way. All of this area, I'm going to go back to the bigger one, all of this area winds up getting into this same pipe network, right?
Sure.
So all of this gets into the same pipe network.
True.
And so we are controlling the rate in our argument to DEP here. And then we could easily not, you know, we could easily not build that inlet, right? That inlet was kind of an amenity to try to help the off-site impacts there. But our argument to DEP is that although we've changed the area to this point of interest, it all gets into the same confined pipe system, right? And so when it gets to here, you know, it's all running in the same pipe system.
Right.
And so it's all collected in the same piece, where this one goes off this way, right? And I don't know at what point that discharges.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the area in pink.
I know exactly what you're asking. You're asking me about changing direction of the watershed, and I'm trying to answer your question.
But you're doing that. You're changing it.
I'm not changing it. It's what
You are, because it flows down Stratford and then down Old Eagle. Now you're taking it down Forest. You changed the direction of the water.
But it's watershed, it means where it ends up.
I know where it ends up, but it has to
system.
go through a low point on Forest Lane first and fill that up before it can go.
We're able to control the rate, right? And so this goes back to the rates. Even after, right, that we're directing more water, you know, or change of drainage area to this area, from a forest perspective, we're still reducing that. And so what that's requiring us to do is make these basins bigger, right? And so if we didn't do that, we could actually make the basin smaller and spend less money on it. Trying to do a public improvement out here was, yes, we can add that inlet, be able to control the water, still be able to control it, get it out into the same watershed to be able to have a discharge.
Okay, so I understand now that yes, you can change the flow of water because you're doing it.
Within a watershed.
Within a watershed, all right, fine. All the water's coming down and going into Forest Lane, which everyone knows has issues. Do you know what the slope of the pipe is in Forest Lane?
Shallow.
Do you know what the percentage is?
I don't know.
0.5%.
Chaplain, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably not legal, but they didn't have a choice because the road and the low point was a given, and the pipe and the invert and where it connects to Forest Lane was all a given. I mean, to Old Eagle. What I'm going to ask is Fairfield Lane has got a good 2% slope from beginning to end. It's all in Radnor Township. Why can't that water be collected and run through Fairfield Lane to the same point on Old Eagle where you said everything collects anyway? And that way you alleviate the problems even greater than what's happening on Forest Lane. You're keeping Radnor water in a Radnor street back to where it's all going to begin with. And saving the people in Forest Lane from any issues that they're dealing with now and will be dealing with in the future.
I think that's
Sorry, Fairfield.
Well, no, it would be under the street, and it would have a 2% slope. There's no way it's going to back up.
So, again, we're reducing the runoff.
I understand that.
Just hear me out. I let you speak. Let me speak. So, on Fairfield, right, we're reducing the runoff. If we had zero runoff, you are not going to zero, right? So, all the houses on Forest here, right, these on Grant are still discharging water here.
I understand.
That is still going to collect and has the potential to back up.
Correct.
Right? It's that is the structural issue that I was referring to. Is that there is a low spot that relies on an inlet for drainage. Right? We're reducing everything that's getting to it, substantively. Right? And if you look at the non-Radnor requirement, we're going from 22 to 6. Right? And there's 55 that's there now, right? 55 that's getting to there now. If you consider the 12, there's like 46, right? So we've reduced that by nearly 20%. If you use the actual that we can count the stone volume, you have a lot less than that.
But can you answer his question? Why can't you?
Yeah, why can't it?
Does Fairfield have a storm sewer drain that you can
His
access?
question is, Frank, his question is, why can't you move it to this other location? And your answer is, we're going to make it so much better for you, which doesn't really respond to his question. Let me ask you two different questions. The first is there a technical or a legal reason that you know off the top of your head why you can't? And if the answer to that is no, is there a possibility to go back and look at that? Understand, no one in this room is dumb. If the answer is, but no one else is dumb. If the answer is because it's going to cost us $150,000 more, and we're already doing you guys such a favor, please stop complaining, then that's fine. That's what the answer is. I don't know that it will satisfy everyone, but they'll at least understand.
I can't answer that last one because I don't spend the money, right? I'm just the engineer doing the design. So
did you guys consider the water going down Fairfield?
So Fairfield is very flat, right? I don't know if it's 2%.
It's not flat.
It's
pretty flat.
No, it's
your
wrong.
sections
Compared
right
to
in
Forest,
here.
that's wrong. If you go down Fairfield, I walk it every day.
Let him answer my question.
My observation
But
is
he's still not
very flat.
answering that.
Guys, please.
There is an inlet right here at the corner, right? I think there's two inlets right here. I don't know the feasibility of coming all the way up there and connecting. I don't. I haven't surveyed it.
Or is there a line?
We could look into that.
Yes, please do.
Thank you.
Please do.
You can look at.
Now, you guys have to also understand the answer that comes back maybe it's going to cost $1 million extra, and we're not interested in doing that. But if they're willing to look into it, they can at least.
It's
find
part of
out.
the condition. Make the developer put it in his price.
What are these homes going for, by the way? What are the townhouses and what are the homes going for, you know?
I'm not the person to answer that question.
They said at the last meeting between 800 to $1 million times 15 is potentially 45 to 50 million, give or take.
Has there been any discussion about putting alternatives to impervious asphalt, pervious asphalt on the streets that you're developing?
Yeah.
We've not looked at that in this instance. I'm a huge proponent of porous materials. It really comes down to kind of a maintenance and operation of it, and knowing long term that it's going to be preserved, and there's certain characteristics to it that it ravels, you know, those little stones break off the top and requires more maintenance. For your, you know, stormwater implementation dollars, I felt that this was the best solution for this site. Again, you know, you have your tools that you can use, and I thought this was the best and most permanent solution that would be effective for everything.
I'm kind of thinking about where the houses are going to be across the street, more so that street you're building.
So we'd be looking to actually dedicate that street, so that would be a question for the township of accepting a porous road. We do not, you know, we were building it to township specs.
I think we would make that a priority.
Does the township know if the townhouses are going to have basements or not? Yeah.
We haven't received a land development plan. I mean, they can come to us a plan in 6 months that has spaceships instead of townhomes. I don't know.
If they have basements, how does that affect your hydrology calculations? There's not as much soil any longer to absorb that water.
It won't impact it. The bottom of the beds there would be almost equivalent to a basement elevation. So a basement or no basement has no impact on the leak.
I was going to ask on the previous slide, where are the inlets on the roadway for the single-family homes?
For the single-family homes, there was going to be lots of them. But controlling the road, we're actually controlling it on each individual lot, so almost each person gets their fair share of road that they're going to have to own. So if you bought this house, you actually have a basin that collects this piece of the road and puts into the basin, and you know the next one and the next one and the next one. So you're going to have a whole series of
drain in front of each house, more or less.
More or less, yes.
You said that system cost $50,000 to $100,000 per home.
Yes.
So 1/10 of that, 10% of the cost of the home, or the subject of the home, is going to be the ditch in the front yard. Okay.
You guys don't understand how much grief I'm giving these guys about stormwater management. Yes, a tenth of the cost is going to be stormwater management.
And stormwater is a huge cost. I don't know if you've done an addition. I'm the front line to it. I usually tell clients to call the township and complain to the township and not me, that I'm only the messenger. But when, you know, I've had homeowners in tears that, you know, are trying to build a patio, and I tell them that their stormwater system to build their patio is going to cost them $50,000, they choke. But that is the reality of these systems. If you're between 500 and 1,000 feet of impervious that you're adding, I tell people that you are at a $20,000 to $25,000 commitment. Right? This is just trying to rip off the Band-Aid real quick. And my initial conversation when somebody calls is, you're in this range. You know, you're in that $20,000 to $25,000 by the time you do your site permit, your permeability testing, and actually implement the system. That's the number you're looking at. If you're over 1,000 feet, the number kind of goes up exponentially. But you can easily, if you're between 1,000 and 2,500, you can easily, in Radnor, because of the way that they make you only count the pipe and not the stone, I tell people you're probably in the $35,000 to $50,000. Not even looking at a project, just hypothetical numbers. We've done single-family residences that have spent $250,000 on stormwater.
Has the property been sold?
No. At least it's not recorded in the records. I'm sure that there is an agreement of sale which includes some contingencies.
I remember sidewalks being discussed at the meeting. If sidewalks go in, and I can't remember exactly which streets we're going to have them, are there going to be infiltration trenches in the grass?
So we would have sidewalks proposed all the way across the property. Obviously up here, we're easily control it. Here it's a calculation of whether we'd be over controlling here to allow that to simply run off. A lot of the times you see the infiltration trenches is when they're retrofitted. And so if a sidewalk was retrofitted, I know Triffin did it right near my house, where they put in a lot of infiltration trenches adjacent to it, trying to also solve the township project. I know on that project, the township spent, I think it was $1.8 million on, for sidewalks, but the sidewalk itself was probably less than 30% of that cost.
Yeah. So I missed. So you're saying they're not.
We have stormwater. We don't have any infiltration trenches. We have stormwater for our.
That will cover that impervious.
That will cover the
impervious.
Yes.
Okay.
It's my understanding that
this property is not currently zoned for townhouses.
That is
What-
correct.
What other options with analysis have you considered? And are you going to ever show us those options?
I don't agree that it's not zoned for townhomes. Townhomes are permitted by conditional use.
Well, that's a fair distinction. There is a conditional use option for this site, which would require the developer to come to the township, meet certain obligations at a hearing before the Board of Commissioners, and if they did, then they would, by right, be able to build townhomes on the site. The problem that we have, which is both a problem and a boon for the developer, is that Radnor's burden of proof to get a conditional use is incredibly vaguely worded. I think at one point in the ordinance it actually talks about the harmonious development of the township, which I guarantee you, George thinks involves townhomes. I guarantee you many of you think involves not townhomes and far fewer of the single-family dwellings. And I have no earthly idea what harmonious development is. It's a meaningless phrase, frankly, in my opinion. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
There's no other options that we considered.
There is another design which I think we're going to see at the next meeting, which is what's being billed as the by right plan. There is no such thing as a by right plan that the township has reviewed it and told the developer that it is in fact by right. But I'm going to call it probably the density analysis that they've done, which is not, which at least according to their calculation says this is how many single family dwellings we could stick on here if we don't get the conditional use. It's my expectation, they have not told me this specifically, but you're hearing a lot of favorable numbers about how they're going to over-control the site. They can save a lot of money, which would then increase the revenue that they ultimately get because they're not going to be able to build all of the various townhomes by not putting in all the stormwater management facilities in the by right or in the by right plan.
But in the west lot though, or whatever that lot is, the small lot, it sounds like they're doing a great job without any conditional uses.
Right, they would not need conditional use in that lot in order to do what they want to do. They're not putting townhomes on there, but they could also save some money there by not putting in as much stormwater management as they are doing right now. So this is explicitly a threat.
What are the conditions of the conditional?
Wait, who's the threat or the lawyer's threat?
It is the developer's threat. They're doing it in the nicest possible way, but this happens in every single development. The developer comes to you with a scary bad plan and they say, well, if you don't want this, you guys have a really nice neighborhood. It'd be awful if something happened to it. Here's the terrible plan, which is our by right what we can do. If you want all the goodies that we can give you in terms of stormwater management, buffering, favorable sight lines, new sidewalks, potentially off-site improvements, then we'd like to have something in return. It's going to cost us millions of dollars in order to put those in. Here's what we're asking.
So if they did the single-family home by right density plan, what would the runoff numbers be to Forest Lane? Would they all of a sudden go from the magical 0 to back to 17, or what would? Because you're saying it's like a threat.
Specifically, and what I'm going to, because you haven't run the numbers, what I'm going to tell you is they're going to hit the minimum of what our ordinance is.
What's that?
I don't know that off the top of my head. He's going to have to control.
So the numbers you're looking for are based on calculations. So I can't say if there was 17 CFS in a 100-year event for this, I can't tell you what that's going to be for single-family homes. That's a whole other phone book he's going to have to provide.
I think I remember him saying it was going to go from 2 was what the ordinance called for, and you were going to take it to 0.2. Right? Is that what you said?
3 to 0.2 is on.
Yeah. So for the 2-year, and this is for this area here, we were at the allowable discharge. So and I would say what the allowable discharge is, what I failed to mention earlier is because of the Darby-Cobbs Creek watershed, we actually have to take the 2-year storm to a 1-year runoff by code, right? So the existing was 3.2, right, was running off. The 1 year was 1.6, so it's saying we have to cut, even before we even start the conversation, to meet code, and I think this was Julie's question earlier, was to meet code, we had to go to 1.6. What we were saying is we actually went to 0.2, right? So we were
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that even with the by right plan, it would still go down to 1.6.
It should go down, yes. Even with the by right plan, the situation should improve.
Yes, okay.
What you won't see is the over improvement. Or, I mean, I don't know, maybe the developer's gonna be really nice, he's gonna spend a lot of money. Maybe the developer figures, we want to have a site that the people are gonna enjoy living on once we build it, and we need to over control in order to satisfy our future customers. But in general, this is my experience with other people. This is not the heavy hand that George has been placing on me thus far, but I'm just gonna tell you guys, you need to understand, if they end up going with a by right plan, they're not necessarily going to spend the amount of money that they are trying to do. They are explicitly trying to give you guys a quid pro quo. Don't misunderstand what's happening right now.
And what about during the construction, when you said you clear cut all the trees, you bring in all the heavy equipment, how long is it between getting to Nirvana and having a situation that could be very, very bad?
So as part of, both the township process and the Mpds process, we actually have to show all during construction stormwater controls. And so these are the post-construction stormwater controls. So the during construction is there will be, temporary basins that we actually build to facilitate the construction of everything else. And typically on a site like this, what happens is they're going to come out, first thing we do is really build the during construction controls, build our overflows and connections, then really begin the demolition and clearing. Once you get to that point, they're really going to want to put the road network and utilities in, right? That's kind of the first thing. Part of that is going to be putting in some of the subsurface basins. They don't want to make those active until such time that everything's stabilized above it. But depending on how it exactly gets phased, is the basins will actually start to come online as construction happens. And so, for instance, up in this area, is if you build this block first, these are most likely going to get connected because this basin is going to get put in, and all these units that are built here are going to get connected into this basin.
So if you build the blue block first, are you cutting the trees down on the teal block?
It depends on, so again, just thinking of the way the site is naturally flowing, is somewhere over here, there's going to be a swale that comes down here and probably a during construction basin in this general location. I haven't done this design yet, but it's going to be somewhere in this location. And so this whole site is really going to naturally flow into that basin. So everything uphill of that can start to get constructed, and they have to build, the way the utilities work is they're going to get PECO and Aqua and everybody else to approve the construction of those utilities going in, then they're going to get the road in, and then these will be kind of padded out, right? So they're going to be ready to build the foundations, and at the same time, these underground stormwater basins will go in.
Did you answer that? Everything will be clear cut before you do anything.
I would say the majority of the site is going to be, I wouldn't say all, right? Okay. But I said the majority of the site is going to be clear after that basin gets clear.
Is there a way, as one of the conditions, we could have over-controlled temporary basins so that it's even more? Because during construction, we've definitely had trouble interdifferent, even when regulations are followed. So is that something we could ask for as a condition?
Yeah, I think that could be a reasonable condition to take a look at, and I can't tell you what that number is standing here right now, but looking at enhanced controls, let's call it, for that during construction, I think is feasible.
Let me ask you sort of a random question. This little piece down here, are you planning to put any stormwater controls there?
We initially were not. We were trying to keep everything up in this area. We were leaving that trying to leave that as unencumbered as possible with, just so we have the least amount of disturbance there and have the most amount of flexibility for planting and things like that. But that is a possibility to be able to put something there. From a during construction standpoint, I don't think it's a large enough area. From a post standpoint, it is a possibility.
Okay, so there's nothing planned right now. Plans are evolving.
Correct.
Steve, excuse me. Is there a Fairfield? Is there a storm sewer on Fairfield?
I know there's something down by Old Eagle. I don't know if it connects with anything at Forest Lane.
From all I could see in it, it looks like it's just the two inlets right at the end at Eagle. Or not at Eagle, at Old Eagle School.
Right.
So it's 9 o'clock, just about. We're kind of dying down. Can we get maybe one more question? And then we've got another meeting after this, so think about your questions and come back with them. If there is one more question, it doesn't have to be.
I guess I just want to clarify, Ken, for the next meeting or sometime, look at that alternate proposal of going to Fairfield. Can we have that?
Yes,
for
I'll
the
take a
next
look at it.
time?
Yep.
I do have a question. It's not stormwater related, don't worry. This is more for everybody here to understand what is the process going forward. I know that they're going to have a presentation next week, the developer. We're going to finally get to see what their by right plan is and maybe additional involvement of this plan. When do they when is it anticipated that they're going to make their application? When is it that we get to go to the hearing? When is it that we get to consider recommending conditions to be placed?
Okay. The full process is, number one, everybody who has not yet is after today going to go home and sign up for the newsletter so that you can get updates in a timely manner. You can do that by going to Radnor.org and signing up. I think it's .org. It might be .com. I think it's .org.
Jack, when's the last one you sent out? Because I signed up a months ago and I haven't gotten it.
This morning. So if you didn't get the one that went out this morning and you think you were signed up from before this morning, then you should check your spam filters. And if you're absolutely certain that it should be getting through, go back to the website and sign up again. But I'm pretty confident spam filters 9 times out of 10. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to have another meeting. It's not going to be limited to the topic of stormwater. I feel like we've addressed a lot of the questions that you guys had on stormwater. There are a couple of updates that I'm hoping Rob can have for us. But the next one is going to address some of the other questions I know we've got about density and sidewalks and everything else. At some point after that, and we have genuinely no control over when that is, they will submit a land development plan to the township. In the normal course of events, that land development plan would go to our planning commission. Since I don't know when they will submit it, I can't tell you when exactly that is, but it will be in the newsletter. And as most of you, I hope, know, I'm sending out both an email to the big group that I've already got. I'm also sending out the newsletter, so that information is in a lot of different places. I'll keep trying to disseminate it. They'll also be on the township website. They'll be on Facebook, I'm sure, because I'll put it on Facebook. It's going to be a lot of different places.
Jack, might you know if the family's considering or would consider other offers for the property?
You can make one. I don't know.
Who do you make it to?
So at least one of the family members is affiliated with the developer, so you'd have to probably make it to the guy who's also developing the site right now.
Yeah.
But you can try.
Jack, there's a website on the bottom of your letter, www.larkinforradnor.com.
.com. Okay, thank you. So larkinforradnor.com. That's a good update. Not .org. Once it goes to the Planning Commission, that is an open meeting, which means that anybody can show up and they can lobby the Planning Commission. We, at the last meeting, had a whole bunch of people show up and lobby us on abortion rights, which we have nothing to do with. We, at the Township Board level, have a pretty thick skin. Planning Commission does not. So go bother them, and they're probably going to help you out. They're not used to residents coming out in force, make a lot of noise. They will pay attention to you, I guarantee you. They would anyway. They're a good group. They're an intelligent group in a way that we as the board are not on this issue. They're educated about this. They see these plans all the time. This is all they do, unlike us. So they're the people that you really want to talk to in the first instance. They will come up with recommendations. The recommendations come to the Board of Commissioners. We will see this at least twice. There's going to be first a caucus when we generally don't take public comment immediately following a caucus, but you can definitely come either at the beginning of the meeting or the end of the meeting and tell us what you're thinking about the plan that's going to be on the agenda. Then there will be a second meeting where we will, at that point, I assume we would have a hearing on the conditional use application. That is a hearing at which I have to double check the rules, but I'm pretty confident you guys can either pro se by yourselves or with an attorney, individually with multiple attorneys, or as a group with a single attorney. You can get together and put on a case why you think they should not be granted conditional use, or if you think they should be granted conditional use, but this particular plan should not be approved for whatever reason, you think that it fails to meet setbacks, or it doesn't control stormwater appropriately, or whatever. If what they were then to get, whatever development rights they get from the township, you could continue to participate in the process by policing them. And when you think something is going wrong and they're not building it according to their plan, you can call me or Steve or anybody else, and we'll send out a stop work order.
And to the commissioner's point, so if they get through conditional use and they get preliminary approval, that's caucus, that's 2 meetings. They come back for final approval, that's another 2 meetings that go before the commissioners. And one difference in Tredyffrin and Radnor, Tredyffrin's planning commission can physically approve a project, and Radnor doesn't work that way. They can only make a recommendation to this board. Just there's a distinction there. So.
Except when there's a conditional use application, then it goes to the Board of Supervisors in Tredyffrin also.
Jack, can you just clarify, Tredyffrin residents do have standing to talk at those meetings?
So our informal policy, we're working on a more formal one, is that we really only want Radnor residents to show up and speak at public comment. But I mean, I don't look at your license when you come up. Just come up and start talking. What am I going to do?
Especially when they have a direct impact, I would say.
Oh, sure.
I know. When I've talked about that with my board about this situation. In the same circumstance, if we had something on our border was really affecting. We have the same rule, by the way, only Tredyffrin residents, but that would be a special case, and we would fine, you know.
And we sent our solicitor, I think, to Newtown Township to talk to them about something they were doing there. So we're doing the exact same thing.
Right.
So this would be a couple of months long process.
They would be so happy if you took a couple months. I'll tell you that. They would be ecstatic. It's a lengthy process, not just what the commissioner stated, but you know, as I was telling this gentleman, how we do our reviews. Well, there's a back and forth there. They get a review letter. They alter the plans. We review it again. Right. So a lot depends on how quickly is that done. But now, I can very easily say it's not 2 months.
Ray laughed at a couple months. What is it?
2 years.
2 years.
So about 18 months less.
They have a hammer, which is that when they submit a land development plan, we need to respond to it within 90 days. They usually give us extensions because, frankly, most of the time the plan that comes to us in the first instance is not approvable. That's where we're giving them notes and saying you guys need to make the following changes. So if they were to say we're not going to give you any more extensions, you've got 90 days from today's date, then our answer is probably going to be your plan is denied. But what we cannot do, the reason I bring that up is to say just because it sounds like this is going to take a really long time, we can't just say as a township, let's drag our feet and make sure that this never gets to fruition. That's not really an option for us, because once they have a plan which they believe really ticks all of our boxes, they're very confident that it's passed all of our appropriate reviews, they can just say you got 3 more months and then you got to make a decision.
Jeff, where in this entire process is it most appropriate for us, the residents, to present our conditions?
Your conditions?
Yeah.
In terms of, like, this is what we want to see?
Yep.
I've already asked for that in the past. As soon as possible.
As soon as possible.
Yeah, because...
But then we get a little chicken and egg because we haven't really seen the plan, but we don't want to wait for the plan to be formalized. I mean...
So your wants list, at least at the initial stage, should probably be, here are the goals that we want to achieve. So the first goal is we want stormwater management taken care of. Gotcha. We want to make sure that the additional traffic which is going to be generated by this site doesn't negatively impact our walk to the train station. We want to make sure that the additional dwellings that you're putting on there don't have a visual impact on my house. I don't want to look at you and see you coming out of your backyard all the time. And then leave it up to them to address that. Once you see their plan, you can then say, I think that you've met my goals with respect to stormwater, but the additional traffic really is not being solved. Here's how I'd like you to specifically solve it. And they may or may not choose to do so.
And I would recommend you do that at every step. Planning Commission, Board of Commissioners, conditional use. back at Board of Commissioners. Yep.
A quick question in terms of Steve, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you coordinating with our engineer at Tredifferent, because we're catching the water and, you know, you guys are shifting it off? I think I would feel much better as a resident if we had some formalization of, you know, at X point and Y point, maybe we get them to.
So, but believe me, Steve's my counterpart and my colleague at Tredifferent, and I, very much want to speak to him once this gets submitted. But just know that Radnor can only review this based on our ordinances, right? It's the Radnor Stormwater Ordinance, it's the Radnor Zoning Ordinance, it's the Radnor Subdivision Land Development Ordinance. But I'll gladly coordinate with Steve.
Just in case he says, you know what, remember back in whatever this happened, you might want to do this, or just he's just one more set of eyes and
not
perspective.
A problem.
Okay, thank
Not a
you.
problem.
Okay, guys, well, we've got another meeting in about a week. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you.